On Christmas Eve, 1945, the small town of Fayetteville, West Virginia, was buzzing with festive cheer. Families were busy preparing for Christmas Day. But for the Sodder family, that night would become a nightmare. George and Jenny Sodder, immigrants with a successful trucking business, had 10 children, but only 9 would be with them on that fateful night. The Sodder home was a modest 2-story frame house, filled with warmth and laughter. As the family gathered to celebrate, they enjoyed a hearty dinner and exchanged gifts. Later, the children were allowed to stay up late. But eventually, exhaustion set in. George and Jenny tucked the younger children into bed and went to sleep themselves, feeling grateful for their close-knit family. Around 1 a.m., Jenny was jolted awake by a strange sound. At first, she thought it was just the house settling. Then, a loud bang echoed through the night, and the unmistakable smell of smoke filled the air. Jenny quickly shook George awake, and they sprang into action. As they rushed to the upstairs bedrooms, they were met with a horrifying sight. Flames were engulfing the house. They managed to get 4 of their children, Sylvia, Marion, John, and George Jr., out through a window. However, in the chaos, the couple realized that their 5 other children, Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenny, and Betty, were still trapped inside. Desperately, George attempted to break back into the house to rescue them. But the fire had already spread rapidly, and the staircase was now ablaze. He ran outside to grab a ladder, but in a shocking twist, he found it missing from its usual place against the house. He then tried to use the family's trucks to reach the upper windows. But to his dismay, one truck wouldn't start, and the other had been buried under snow. With flames raging, George could only watch in despair as the house burned to the ground. Neighbors arrived and attempted to help, but it was too late. The fire department was called, but the response was slow, hampered by the wartime conditions and limited resources. By the time firefighters arrived, the house was already reduced to a smoldering ruin. When the fire was finally extinguished, a search of the wreckage began. Despite the devastation, there were no signs of human remains. The fire chief suggested the heat might have incinerated everything. But many experts later argued that bone fragments would likely still be found, even in a fire of such intensity. The lack of any evidence that the children had perished only deepened the mystery surrounding their disappearance. As the family mourned, several strange details began to surface. The latter's absence was perplexing, as was the fact that the family's phone line had been cut. Was this just a coincidence? Or was it something more sinister? One neighbor reported seeing a man lurking around the house on the night of the fire. And another witness claimed to have seen a strange car parked outside earlier that evening. The community was devastated by the loss, and the Sodders began to suspect foul play. They theorized that their children had been kidnapped, possibly as an act of revenge due to George's outspoken criticism of Mussolini and his politics. This theory gained traction, especially as George had faced hostility from certain locals who were sympathetic to the Italian dictator. The months following the fire were filled with grief, but also with determination. The Sodders hired private investigators to help them search for their missing children. The family received numerous tips, with reports of sightings of the children across the state. One woman claimed she saw 4 of the children with 2 men and 2 women at a rest stop in South Carolina. Another lead pointed to a Charleston hotel, but all leads went cold without any solid evidence. In the early 1950s, the Sodders took their search a step further. They erected a billboard along Route 16, offering a $10,000 reward for information leading to the recovery of their children. The billboard featured the children's photos and the words, "Missing," in bold letters. This act caught the attention of many passing through the area, and people began to talk. One day in 1968, more than 2 decades after the fire, Jenny received a mysterious photograph in the mail. The photo depicted a young man who bore a striking resemblance to her missing son Louis. On the back of the photo were the words, "Louis Sodder. I love brother Frankie. Illo boys. A 90132 or 35. The family felt a mix of hope and anxiety as they pursued this lead, hiring another private investigator to follow it. Unfortunately, despite their efforts, this lead proved fruitless, just like the many before it. Throughout the years, the Sodder family never lost hope. George passed away in 1969. But Jenny continued to search for answers until her death in 1989. Their surviving children held on to the belief that their siblings were still alive somewhere. Lost but not forgotten. Today, the story of the Sodder children continues to captivate people, fueled by the mystery and tragedy that unfolded on that fateful night. The unanswered questions linger, leading many to wonder about the fate of those 5 children who vanished without a trace. Their story is not just one of loss. It's a testament to the strength of a family's love, and the lengths they will go to seek the truth.